just sort of do a little bit of a talk through on what I'm doing. I have obviously got the basics down. These portraits can look quite ugly at the beginning, and it is a case of continual refinement until you get to the finished piece. So what I'm doing now is adding some more of these sort of mid-tones in. I haven't got many highlights on as yet, so I'm going to get the lower tone, the mid-tones in, and then I'll add the highlights on afterwards, a bit further down the process. So I thought I'd just do a little bit of filming so you can see a bit about my process here. Oops, a bit darker really than I meant to be there. So currently what I'm doing is I'm just kind of looking and trying to pick up some of the skin tones. I was going for a bit more pinky on the cheeks, which I've just put in here down the side of the nose and across the cheeks here. And really at this point you're just painting in the same way that you would any other, you know, an oil painting or, you know, any other style. Yeah, I'm just picking out some of the pinkier areas for a minute. And during my camera stop, I seemed to drop my brush in the darker red, so I've gone much darker there than I intended to. What I can do, if I do that, I can always scrape, you know, you can scrape it back, so there's no big shakes if you do go too far. Can make some interesting blends sometimes as well. Definitely better if you test it. I'll go with it. Stage is really just about looking at the colours. I'm trying to really squint and see what is actually there. Rather than what you think is there. I'm also trying to get a thicker layer of wax down, so I've still got quite a lot of the white of the paper coming through at this stage. So I'm trying to fill in some of these. Sometimes it's nice to use that white, but at the minute I'm just trying to fill in some of these holes so that I don't have so much. So I've got a thicker layer of wax basically. don't get nearly as much coverage with this style of painting as you do with some of the other wax styles. With the paintbrush, you kind of, because the wax is cooling on the brush quite quickly, you know, I mean, I could actually use the stylus here if I wanted to, but I quite like the painting with brushes, and I really like my hot plate. I don't find I get the same colour mixes on with my stylus as I do with a brush and the hot plate going. It's easy to forget where you got to. Okay, right, I think I've done enough for a minute, so what I'm going to do now is give it a fuse, see what I've got. So I'm basically melting this layer that I've just put onto the other layers underneath and onto the paper, onto the board. As I say, ordinarily I would tend to use a wooden board rather than the paper, but I'm going with what supplies I have in my studio today. But equally it's quite good to work on something different. You can actually use canvas and papers, and people tend to add a microcrystalline wax to their waxes, but that's not a technique I tend to use. I prefer to work on the flat surface. I mean, to the point you can literally kind of roll your canvas up, which is, you know, really handy if you're travelling or anything. But so personally, I don't tend to use that. So I'm going to give it a fuse, and we'll see how many layers we can add on the paper. Okay, might be a bit noisy for a moment. I can actually blend, whilst this is still molten, I can blend some of these pieces out if I want to. Always seem to manage to pick up a daub of ink or wax where it's not supposed to be for some reason. Okay. Remove that one, where it came from. It fell off the hot air gun, I think. But it's easy to remove. Another brush here. So there we go. That's still going to stay hot and molten for a minute or two, but I will just I can still paint on top of that. think I might have said in one of the other videos, this is where not having a solid board is a disadvantage because the paper pops up, but so I'm not worrying about that too much today. Time to add some colours. People always ask me what colours I'm using as well, and I tend to make it up as I go. I get drawn to a colour and that's what I go with. Can add, so these pigments are great, they're really, really thick, really high quality pigments. They're expensive, but they, you know, a little bit goes a really long way. But then you can add your encaustic medium to them. Just effectively just like adding watercolour really to, sorry, water to your watercolour paints. Just makes it a bit more translucent and slightly different. Just thins it down a little bit, which I quite like on skin tones. It's still very pink at the minute, but we'll work with that. So I'm going to keep playing away with this. And I think what I'll do for the rest of the painting is to do a bit of a time lapse, because this is really just me thinking, plotting, playing, testing colours and refining and adding. So you've kind of got the, hopefully this video has shown you how I apply the paint and how I fuse each layer. So I'd say I'll just do a bit of painting, fuse, bit of painting, fuse, and I'll just keep on adding. And then for the rest, well, not all of it, but for certainly the next section of the painting, what I'll do is I'll do a time lapse so that you can see, you see the whole thing, but without watching it at real pace, which can be pretty slow and dull. Maybe you don't agree, but yeah, anyway. So I'll time lapse the rest of it, and you can see this all speeded up a bit. I'll do one last fuse before I finish off on this section, and then yeah, catch you. Oh, hang on, there we go. Let's do a quick fuse first. Start to see, when you get that translucency, you start to see the colours underneath come through. And it's where they really start to mix and blend. You want to blend them a bit more, you hold the heat gun over that area for a bit longer. If you've got quite a lot of fine detail, you'll just do a really quick fuse so that you just move the heat across without blowing it everywhere, is the hope. As I say, I'll continue working onto these, and I'll continue to refine it and get more and more detail in as I go, but I will do that on another video. Okay.